This is a very warm welcome to our politics webinar. Hopefully you're here because you are interested in doing politics A-level, and this is a chance to find out a little bit more about the course and ask questions if you have them. My name's Kate Brett, I'm the Head of Humanities here at WQE, and we're going to be hearing in just a moment from my colleague Joyce Malmo, who teaches politics, and she's going to explain about the course. So we're going to have a short presentation which she'll take over for. If you have questions already, or if anything comes up during the presentation, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you just hover your mouse over the screen, you'll be able to kind of see the Q&A button, and you can write questions into that at any point during the presentation or afterwards. And what we'll do is at the end of the presentation, we'll take questions and I'll be reading them out and Joyce can be answering them for you. So I hope you find this really informative. As part of the presentation, we'll be giving you information about how you can contact us directly if you have any more questions. And I hope this will do quite a lot to reassure you and inspire you about what a great course this is, and how you can get the best from it as you come as a student in September. So let me hand over to Joyce, and she's going to talk you through what it is to study politics and some information about the course.
So good afternoon, everyone. Again, welcome to this webinar. My name is Joyce Malmo, and I'm one of the main politics teachers at WQE. I'm going to tell you a little about the course today. Now, currently, we have around 120 politics students. And actually, what we've seen is in the last few years, there's actually been quite a bit of a rise in the number of students that want to take on A-level politics. And actually, to be honest, I blame it a little bit on Brexit, because once we had the Brexit referendum, we had more students wanting to learn about politics. So what we see actually now is that more students who have very little prior knowledge of politics are actually interested to find out, how does UK politics work? How does a referendum work? Yeah, what was the relationship with the UK and the EU, and what will happen, you know, when Brexit is completely finalized. And that kind of takes me a little bit into the course itself. So as I mentioned before, there's more students who take on the course who are curious about politics. While from my experiences previously, it's mainly been a lot of students who already are engaged in politics, really interested to follow the news. Well, the good news for those of you who actually might be here considering doing A-level politics, but might be worried, actually, do I really know enough? Well, there is some good news for you here. So I'm going to show you the next slide. So the A-level politics is a 2-year course, and at the end of the 2 years, you've got 3 exams. Now, the way it's set up is that in the first year, you start with UK politics, and we start with some really basic things. So we start with key concepts such as democracy. We talk about what's a referendum. You also learn about the different ways that people can engage in political life, not only through voting, but being a member of a political party, but also we look at pressure groups and how we've seen a rise in involvement in pressure groups, how more people are engaged in politics online by signing e-petitions. And some of you might have already signed some e-petitions. Protests, for instance. So what's currently happening with the Black Lives Matters protest that's been happening now across the globe, you know, that is as well politics, and those are the things we discuss. You also learn in the first year some very basic things, or foundational things, such as how does our electoral system work, first past the post? How do we elect those MPs? And we also look a bit about voting behavior. We look at where, you know, who goes out and vote. Is there any difference between age? Do older people, are they more generally likely to vote than younger people? So we look a lot at those basic things. And then we move on to more complicated things. So you'll be learning about Parliament. How does Parliament really work? What's the composition of Parliament? What's the role of MPs? Yeah, you also look at the Prime Minister and the government and the cabinet, and we will look at things such as what are the powers of the Prime Minister and what's the functions of a cabinet. You also will learn about how bills turn into laws, so the whole process in Parliament on that. And we will discuss different topics that's happening. So to give you an example of one thing I have been discussing with my students currently is how has Boris Johnson and the government handled the pandemic? Yeah, have they handled it well or not? And that's the beauty of politics. It's not static, it's ever changing. But it also means that you need to have an interest in following the news and being engaged in what is happening. So the first year, as I mentioned before, just to summarize that, it really sets the foundation, yeah? And you learn about how the UK political system works. The second year, what we've chosen at WQE, so there are some options, but we've chosen to do US politics. So you will learn everything about how the US political system works. Yeah, so everything from Congress, which is equivalent to Parliament in the UK, and how they operate, the composition of this, and how legislation is made in the US, to learning about the election. So I assume that most of you are aware that there is a presidential election coming up this year, and you will learn about how does that work? How is the presidential election carried out? What's the process of it? You also learn about the powers of the president as well. What are the formal powers? What are the informal powers? What are the limitations? And then at the end of component 3 on American politics, you also will look into comparing the UK political system with the American political system. So it's a very nice all-rounded course overall. And as well, actually, if you have an A level, a good grade in your A level politics, then actually, yeah, this is actually highly valued by a lot of universities and employers. Because in those 3 exams that you're going to do, so we've got 3 components, 2 around UK politics and government and 1 about US politics. The exams are all very essay driven, yeah? And in your essays, you learn how to analyze using different examples and evaluating, various questions. So, and this is obviously a really good skill to take with you on further. Now, a lot of the students currently doing A-level politics, a lot of them, will do A-level history, sociology, economics, or law. These are really good subjects to combine with A-level politics. And for instance, history, which many of my students do, there's a lot of overlap in exam technique there. So really, really good. I'm gonna just go through and show you a picture here. So I know it's, we've got the pandemic now. Normally what we do every year, we take our students to Parliament. So we organize a trip to Parliament. This is a picture of the trip we did last year. It was a great trip. So we normally take the students there and they will get a guided tour around Parliament. Now, last time we went, we saw actually quite a few famous politicians. So, it was quite exciting for the students. And then they will have a little workshop around a topic, being electoral systems or laws and debating. And that's all relevant to the curriculum that we have. In terms of requirements, yeah. So obviously the normal standard college entry requirements apply here. Now what we ask for in A-level politics is that you do have a GCSE grade 5 in English language. And the reason we do that is because it's so heavily essay based. So that's really, really important. And again, if you're very interested in politics, if you know a lot, obviously that's going to be a huge benefit, but you don't need to. So I can give an example. I had one student, very little prior knowledge, was very interested about politics because of what happened with Brexit, and she wanted to really understand the system. And she said the time when she can vote, she wanted to be sure that she could make a proper judgment, yeah, on which party she wanted to vote for. And she actually became one of my top 3 students in terms of grades in my class. So what's really important is that there is some interest there and also willingness to watch the news, because as I mentioned before, politics is not static. So you got your textbook, you learn your theory, but things happen. So just think about the coronavirus now. Think about American politics, what's happened now with Donald Trump, with George Floyd. You know, all of these things are new examples and cases that you can bring in with your essay. And everything that's happening out there, you can always link that back to the theory. So an interest in politics or desire to learn, that's really, really key. So that's obviously something that, you know, you need to think of. Will I be interested, you know, looking at the news, you know, every single day? So that was kind of a little bit about the course, the entry requirements. I quickly want to show you as well how you can find a bit more information about the course online. So most of you, I would assume, would have been on the WQE website. If you haven't, have a look around. So if you go to the website, and what you do is you click on menu at the right top end. You then go to courses. And if you scroll down, you go to A level, click on that one, go down, and under humanities and social science, you will find politics. And if you click here, you will get some more information. And the course sheet is very useful, so it's good for you to have a read at that. And also, if you've got any further questions, obviously we're going to take some Q&A right now. I think some of you have already put a few questions in, so we will obviously answer those, or attempt to answer those for you. But if you, after this webinar, would have any questions, you can, if you see at the bottom of the sheet, send an email to admissions@wqe.ac.uk and ask your question, and they will send it to me. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint, and I'm ready to take some questions here.
Great, thank you, Joyce. All right, so I've got a couple of questions that have come up on the question and answer button already. So a few sort of just waiting. So now's a good time to type them in if you have thought of something. So the first one from Aisha, would politics be a good A-level for a law degree?
Yeah, it could be, definitely. So, I mean, law is very much a tricky one because it's very kind of, some say it's good to do A-level law, and some say wait until you go to university. There is overlap between law and politics. And I do think that, to some extent they go well in hand. If you're thinking about doing law at university, you will learn about how bills turn into legislation. We talk about the Supreme Court. So there's quite a bit of overlap here. And I very often have got students who actually do A-level law who will, provide extra information in lessons and be engaged when we talk about certain topics that's related to law. But definitely, I think understanding the political system, if you are going to do law at university, I think that is just providing you with a greater holistic view that will be useful for you, definitely. And I got quite a few students doing law that do politics.
Great, thank you. Joe wants to know, which exam board is the course?
Yeah, so it's Edexcel. So you can go on there and find more information. You can find a specification there, which gives you a bit more detail on the course. So it is Edexcel that we use.
Great, thank you. Okay, Will has asked a question. Are controversial opinions or non-politically correct opinions equally judged?
Oh, that's a really good question, actually. So in my classes, we often have, weekly debate, a discussion about something that happens. And I will tell you that not all the students agree on things. And that is okay. And what we normally do in the classroom, we said, we have to be able to talk about things, otherwise why study politics? We have to discuss things, and we should be able to share our views. But we obviously got a rule in the classroom, about that we need to be respectful of each other's views, but we also need to be, more diplomatic in how we see things. But yeah, of course, I mean, with the Brexit referendum, I've had students who were very much leavers, and a majority of students who were Remainers, but we still managed to talk about each other's views, and that's definitely important. I do not want to have a classroom where students, you know, keep quiet. That's not the point of politics.
So Adil asks, what other subjects would you recommend to take if somebody wanted to study law? Is taking law A-level better instead?
Do you know, I'm not a law teacher, but I have had this discussion with law teachers about it. And the law teachers I've spoken to is, you know, I've done a little bit of law myself, and I think either you really love law and you get it, but it's a way of thinking. And if you can be exposed to it at A levels, you know, why not, is what the teachers have said. Very often they get recommended, oh, don't do it until you start at university. But my personal take on this, but don't take this, you know, too seriously, it's just my personal take, is if you're really considering doing law, why not already be exposed and get some foundation in law already at A levels?
Great, thank you. So Dipesh asks, are there any extracurricular activities to do with politics?
So we've got a Parliament trip, obviously. We do, I mean, the extracurricular activities, I would say, is, you know, a little bit, that's our little bit debating thing, you know, having on a Friday afternoon, last lesson, you know, we do a debating thing, but our mainly one is a trip to Parliament.
I was going to just add in there, actually, Joyce, we've also got enrichment activities,
Yes,
one of which is debating.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you can do more debating if you would like. So that's an opportunity for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Will asks, is it worth learning and reading the textbooks prior to start in September?
I would say, I mean, it's up to you. If you're really eager and you know, you've got a lot of spare time on hand, then why not? I can show you a picture of the textbook that we are using. So it's the politics. It's quite a big book, but it's got all the material for the 2 years in it, and it's from Pearson's, and it's literally just called Edexcel, AS and A-level politics. So hopefully you can see it here. You can always send us an email, and I'm happy to send you the ISBN if you want to, you know, get it. Obviously, familiarizing yourself, I think, will be quite useful, but I would rather say to students that start following the news. So before you start in September, follow the political news. And I would say follow UK politics news, and try to also start following American politics news, getting into habit. You know, if you don't do this already, get into the habit to watch the news with regards to politics.
Okay, so question from Ben. Will we be having debates on set subjects, or is it decided before the debates?
Okay, so what normally happens, so to give you an example, I had a bit of a debate last week online with my students, and that was in relation, we're doing conservatism at the moment, and then we linked it to what's currently happening, so how the government's responded to the coronavirus. But I've allowed my students to beforehand come up with ideas on that discussion, but all I've said, it needs to be related to what we are doing. Sometimes though, you know, something happens in the news that's quite important, and then we will, you know, automatically, you know, students will come into the classroom and say, oh, Miss, have you seen what's happening now? What's your take on this? And we will start off with a little bit of discussion on that. So sometimes it's planned beforehand by students, you know, coming up with suggestions the week before, and sometimes it's a bit ad hoc, depending on, you know, if something major happens in the news there and then. So there is a flexibility there. There's no, you know, kind of set structure necessarily.
Aisha says, as you said, there is a lot of information to collect and remember. To prep for this, what do you recommend?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what you can really prep for it before you start going through the information. I think what is most important is when you start going through the textbook and need to retain information is to find some really good techniques, what works for you then to retain this information. So things that we are doing or that students are doing in my class is, one of them is Quizlet, which they love. So for each chapter, we've got a Quizlet, and that helps them to retain information, key terms. We also do quite a bit of mind mapping in the classroom as well. So, making, big mind maps to retain information as well. So there's a lot of kind of different techniques, but obviously one technique works well for one student, another one works better for another student. Mind maps works well for some students, but other students like to go through their notes. But I think what's really important is note taking, effective notes, and that's something that you'll be working on when you start. We're going to do some exercises on that.
Great, thank you. So Simran asked, do we need to buy any study books for September?
Yeah, so we are going to have some study books, textbooks in class, but I do always recommend that students do spend the money in getting a textbook at home as well, so that you've got it's important. So we expect students to study around 5 hours a week of independent study, and I find that students who got the textbook and go through the textbook rather than relying on the PowerPoints and information that we've got, they tend to do better. So yeah.
So just to sort of add to that, we've just bought quite a lot of textbooks, so that there should be no need for people to have to buy their own. We should be able to provide one, I think, for all the first years. So hopefully that's all in place for September.
Okay. Thanks, Kate, for that.
So from Dipesh, would a politics A-level be beneficial for a degree in politics, philosophy and economics?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've got quite a few students who done A-level politics. I would say probably 2/3 of my students go on and do some kind of politics related degree. And there's a lot of options now. So you've got the PPE, politics, philosophy, economics. You've got the PE, politics and economics. Definitely, absolutely. I think that's hugely beneficial.
So question from Morgan, do we do politics as an AS level?
No, we don't. So we only have it as a 2-year A-level course.
Thank you. Aisha wants to know, what are essays like, and do we involve current affairs in these pieces of writing?
Yes, you do. If you want to get to the higher grades, then absolutely yes. And that's why it's so important to go through the news. So absolutely. Obviously, the textbook got lots of case studies and stuff, but the textbooks cannot be updated continuously because so much happens in politics. And if you can able to use examples that are happening, in politics and link that to the theory, then obviously, that's going to help you to get the top grades, definitely.
Is it worth just explaining something about how long essays are and how many words would be in one, that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. So we mainly have got 30-mark essays. So a 30-mark essay is typically an introduction, 5 to 6 main paragraphs, and a conclusion. So it could be anything up from, I would always say, kind of a minimum of 1,000 words. But often what you will find, to get as much information and examples in, you're going much more towards the 1,200 to 1,500 words. So it is quite tough. So to give you an example, the first exam, which is component 1, has 3 essays that you need to write in the space of 2 hours. 2 of them are 30 markers and 1 of them is a 24 marker. And the 24 marker is slightly shorter than the 30 marker, with 4 main paragraphs rather than 5 to 6. So hopefully that answered your question.
So another question on the debates. Do you have prep time before debates, or do they tend to be more off the cuff?
No, so if we have set the week before that we're going to do a debate on a topic the following week, then the students will have you know, a week's time to prep for it. When it's ad hoc, it's more of a discussion rather than a full-on debate where people take sides, but we just discuss what's been happening in the news and how students feel about it, and kind of what their views are on it. But normally what I do is, if some students haven't watched news, don't really know what's going on, I always give them kind of a explanation of what has been happening.
Great. So question here about, are there any particular TV shows or podcasts that we should listen to help to prepare us?
Okay, so one thing that I have failed so far, but I'm going to keep trying to do it, is listen to Radio 4 in the morning, because it has really good, you know, good examples on what's currently happening in politics. And very often, you know, you will have ministers being interviewed on there, so it gives you really good understanding of the issues. It can be a bit kind of complex sometimes to listen to if you don't have a lot of foundation in politics, but Radio 4 is one I do recommend. As well, the BBC News app, get that on your phone, yeah, and check out the news there, which is really good. There are also a few websites, one called Aas Level politics.com, I believe, and that one has got some really good video clips that's related to the curriculum and some really good information. There is also another website, which is Tutor to You, I believe, that's really good for economics, but it's getting increasingly good for politics as well. You will find quite a few resources there on politics, and essays and relevant material there as well.
Yeah, I was going to say you can also get quite good access to newspapers online. So the Guardian is online, and that's free access for people. Yeah. I was thinking things like the Andrew Marr television programme on a Sunday morning. Absolutely. He often is interviewing politicians, and that can be quite a good one to watch.
And Question Time as well.
Yeah, yeah.
On Thursday night. It's very late, but that's also very good to.
Yeah. Yeah, and I listen to the at the moment it's called the Coronavirus podcast, but it's a BBC newscast. So that's quite a good sort of one that you can listen to at any point, and it'll give you a kind of they do them every sort of 2 or 3 days, but quite up to date analysis. And it's, you know, the BBC correspondent like Laura Kuenssberg and Katja Adler, some of the kind of key journalists who report on politics feed into that. I think probably podcasts and things is something we need to kind of compile a sheet of, because there's just so many different ones that you could listen to and look at. Great. So Alicia is asking about what careers politics can lead to.
Okay, so I did a degree in politics at university. I specialized in international politics. And the career path I took at the time was to work for an international think tank in Australia. And we did a lot of policy research in the Pacific and as well in Asia. So that's the route you can do. So with a politics degree, you could go and work for think tanks. You could work for pressure groups, even, you know, pressure groups like RSPCA, because they have a lot of links with politics, and obviously they, you know, try to influence legislation around animal cruelty, for instance. So those are two parts you can go into. So you don't need to become a politician with a degree in politics. You can even work for an international aid agency. You can work for, you know, the Bureau of Statistics, for instance. Yeah. So there's a lot of different pathways you can go, and where a politics degree will be, you know, highly valued.
So a question about the taster activity. So if you've been onto the website, you'll know that we have put up some taster activities for current year 11 students to kind of give them a little insight into what topics are like. So Simran's asking, is the taster activity mandatory?
I think it's useful to do it, absolutely. It gives you a little bit of an idea, and perhaps it will help you because you can see some of the topics, and you can see, or do you enjoy, you know, doing a bit of research on these topics and read about it. So I think it could be definitely useful, you know, for yourself to do that one, definitely.
And I think our last question from Aisha, are there no exams at the end of AS?
No, because we don't do AS, so we do A Level. Where I used to teach before, they did AS and A Level, but we don't have that option at WQE. It's a 2-year course, an A Level course.
Yeah, and it's worth sort of saying that politics doesn't have any coursework in it. Some A-levels do, but politics doesn't. So it's very much that you work for 2 years and then you sit the exams at the end of the 2 years. That's not to say we don't have internal exams, we definitely do. But the formal external exams just happen at the end of the 2 years. So, great. Okay, I'm just checking to make sure. Oh, there's one more here. Here we go, from Deeqa. Would you say a citizenship GCSE would help in politics?
Absolutely. Quite a few of my students who've done citizenship, they come in to the lessons and, you know, they already got some knowledge there. So it's basically the A-level politics includes much more than what is in citizenship, but you will have some of the foundation, because in citizenship you look at, for instance, the electoral systems. So you will have already an understanding, and at A-level politics you go more into detail in those things and evaluate things. So I think that's hugely beneficial, absolutely.
Great. Okay, well, I think that's exhausted our questions, and that's certainly been plenty of them. We've had a really thorough grilling of Joyce and what A-level politics is involving. So just to reiterate what Joyce said earlier, if you would like to ask any more questions, if you want to email us, you can email the admissions@wqe.ac.uk email address and ask them directly, and they'll get forwarded to Joyce or one of the other staff here. We just really encourage you to consider politics if you